Okay, so I've got the crappy speedometer out of the car. Want to replace it with the Lotus speedometer in the car. Hoping this one works the part. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it will. Yes, as promised, this is the part 2 of that, and what I'm about to go into is to show you that I had to take 2 good gauges to make 1 gauge work. I ended up having to use the Odometer gauge guts and put them inside of the Lotus case. I'm going to walk through that and show you what happened and show you how I was able to get these 2 things to work together. Maybe I should put a drill or something on it, make sure it does work. Hey, we're getting some movement. That's a plus, right? Oh yeah, you can peg it. Part of me kind of wants to put some graphite in it. And it's sealed like a gauge on a Porsche. You can get these apart. They're not that bad to get apart, but you do end up doing a little bit of damage to the edge. But in all fairness, this, if you can see it, it's got a lot of paint missing off of it. It looks a little rough. So while we're doing this, I might just take this off. We'll clean it up and paint it with some flat black and make it look a little better than it does right now, because it could stand a little bit of love. I thought I would just talk through some of this and probably just edit out whatever doesn't make any sense. But anyway, this was me taking the glass off. After I got the glass off, I started disassembling the gauge. The gauge is pretty straightforward to disassemble. I know I probably could have sent this gauge off to have it repaired, but the name of my channel is Let Me Try to Fix It 5000. I might as well try it. I knew there was nothing really wrong with the Odometer gauge, other than it was the wrong one. Even though the Lotus gauge didn't work, I could at least use the face of it and probably make something to work, so I thought I'd give it a try. Okay, so I spoke too fast, and I did find a problem with the Lotus speedometer that I have to put in the car. It has a spring that brings the gauge back down to 0 miles per hour, and I found out due to a little slop in a shaft, it will cause that spring to bind up. So that's a little hokey. Okay, update. So the speedometer that I got will not do anything to make the needle go up, and on that, it even sticks. That's not gonna work for me. Also, if you look, the odometer and the trip meter aren't going up. Can't have that either. I want this thing to work. So getting back to the odometer I did take it back out the car. This is it, and I'm gonna see if we're lucky. I don't think we will be. Might have to come up with something to make this work. I was gonna see if I could take the face from the Lotus gauge and put it on this, and then get this to fit back in the canister. I think that it will. One is a little deeper than the other. That may be an issue, but we're gonna try to make this work somehow. I don't know, but we're gonna see what we can make work anyway. I do have a couple things I'm gonna have to figure out. For one, the shaft on the one I'm gonna try to use is slightly larger than the one on the Lotus. Ew, I really did not want to use an orange needle. That's one option, and you know, I could always paint it. That might be the way to go. So I can take care of that. That part will work then. The other thing I need to do is I need to modify the glass. This is the glass for the odometer gauge. This is the glass for the Lotus. I'm not gonna cut this, but I'm using this as a template and I've got to reposition the hole for the trip reset. It's not in the right place, so I've got some plexiglass. I'll use this as a template. I'll cut a piece out on the bandsaw, and I think that'll take care of that. So what the plan is gonna be is that this is the odometer guts. This is the speedometer out of the odometer. This right here is the guts out of the Lotus speedometer, and this thing is not working. The odometer, or the speedometer itself, is kind of sticking a little bit. The odometer is not even working. So not going to use that, but I do plan on using that. So at least I have a gauge that looks like a Lotus gauge, whether it really is or not. I can work with it roughly here. All I'm doing is getting that hole.
I thought I would interject something right here. When I drilled the hole in the face of the Lotus gauge, I started out with a small bit and gradually worked myself up to the size hole I needed. I think I ended up going through about 4 or 5 different drill bits before I finally got up to the size I needed. The reason that I did that is because I thought that I might would damage the face of the gauge if I started with a big drill bit. So to keep that from happening, I started small.
Yeah, I think that's gonna do the trick. Things first, what I'm gonna do is put this in here and secure it. So that's in, that's clear. That's what I've ended up with right there. So we're gonna try it. Cool with that. Around it. Try to cut that as small as I can get it. So day 2 of this little project, and I stopped last night because I painted this, and actually I primed it yesterday afternoon, then I painted it last night before I crashed out, and got it this morning. This is what I got, and I needed to let that dry. I also made a gauge. This right here was actually the orange gauge off of the odometer speedometer. I really didn't want to use it. I really wanted to use the Lotus needle, which was this one, but the size of the end of the shaft was a little different size and it wouldn't work. Instead of trying to drill this out to get that to fit, I just used the odometer needle and painted it. Just got some like tester paint from Michael's and painted it black and white to try to match the look of the gauge that's already on the car. It looks very fluid when you use it. Looks like it's supposed to work. The biggest difference between what I had and this is the original trip reset button was here, and I had to relocate it down here to get it to work. Also, the holes that mount the display to the speedometer mechanism on the Lotus were here, and on the odometer were here, and so I do have that to deal with, but I'm just going to go with it. I don't think that's too obvious. I also used black tape on the back side of the gauges so light wouldn't bleed through, so it should look pretty good when it's reinstalled in the car. The other thing that I did was, this was the glass that came out of the Lotus. This was the glass that came out of the odometer gauge, and they are slightly different in size. You can see that one is a little bigger than the other. So neither one of these would work. This one wouldn't work because it was too big. This one would not work because the trip reset was in the wrong position. So I had to use both of them to come up with a piece of plexiglass that I cut that should get the job done, and that should work. I could have maybe used this, but then I would have had to have some way to drill out the hole to make the hole a little bit bigger, and I didn't have anything that would drill glass without potentially cracking it. And so I just made another one out of plexiglass, and this is what I came up with. And as you can see, they're identical in size, and the hole looks like it's about the same location. It will be actually sitting this way a little bit and should work. I'm hoping it does anyway. We'll reassemble this thing and see what we got. Hopefully it'll work. Okay, one other issue I'm gonna have to deal with real fast is that this, you can see how it tapers out on both sides. It's actually a little too wide. I'm gonna try to trim that away just with a grinder real fast and try to make it a little more flat. I put it on my belt sander and trimmed away about 1/8 of an inch of it. I think that's pretty good. I think that's gonna be enough to make this thing work without sitting crooked on the front of the glass. So let's take a look, see what it looks like. So this is what I've got, and the gauge seems to work as advertised. So the trip seems to be working, and I'm okay with that. The next thing I need to do is put it back on the wooden block. I've got to put an edge back on these to get these where they'll crimp onto the gauge housing. And once I do that, I'm going to call this part good. After we get this right here done, the next thing we'll do is go to the car and try to lubricate that cable a little bit, because that cable was making a lot of noise. My drill runs about 75 miles an hour. Who knew? I just keep getting hit with more issues. This looked like it was gonna be an easy job and it was gonna be, nothing to it, but I tell you, I keep running into more and more problems. So when somebody along the way decided to put the odometer gauge in the car, it apparently did not just drop right in and fit. And what they ended up doing was cutting all this right here out. So that is now wallered out. It's actually too big. So what I've got to do now is take this plastic trim piece right here. I do have another one on the other instrument cluster I've got, and I'm going to drop this in to replace this one as long as it's in good enough shape and looks good. Let me show you here. So like there's a plastic layer here, and underneath the plastic is a metal layer. It's been cut out for each of the gauges, and because the odometer gauge is bigger, this is the housing the odometer gauge came in, it won't just drop right down in there. So whoever put that gauge in, they took a file or a saw blade or something, let me see if I can, and drilled it out or filed it out so that would slide in there. And good for them, I mean, that works, and now they got a gauge. But now they took the original stuff and made it where you couldn't put the original stuff back in. So the way I'm going to try to get around that is that I'm going to take that, I'm going to cut off like half of it. I'm going to keep this front half with this flaring, and I'm going to take it and put it on my gauge. But before I do that, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this plastic piece here out of this one and put it in here, because it's actually cut thinner than what this one is. I hope that's making sense. So what I'll end up doing is taking half of this, it'll be sitting directly on the metal, and then I'll have a new one of these that's the correct size to put over top of this, so you won't see any of this. All you'll see is the new gauge, and this should give it something flush to sit against. So that hopefully should keep the gauge from falling through. That's my plan. I'm sticking to it. I think that's gonna work. So just sit back, watch, and we'll see if we can get this thing together. like that. Well, kind of like that. And what I'm gonna do now is I'll take this, I'm gonna cut half of that away, use that as a sleeve to put that in, and we'll see how well that works. Okay, before I put this new cover on, the next thing we're gonna do is take this ring that I cut out and I'm gonna put that in there because that fits. The factory gauge would not fit in there, it would literally just slide out. I'm gonna fit that up there, and then after I fit that up there, then I'll put the plastic cover on, and hopefully that will be somewhat concealed.
I also had to get a 1-inch wide aluminum bar of metal and use that as the anchor that held the gauge into the instrument cluster. I also soldered a set of LEDs to some wires and put them in the speedometer.
Okay, so part one of this is this, and I've got it back in. I'm pretty satisfied with the way that looks. I got it mounted. You can kind of see my whole mount system type thing going on here inside it. I'm very satisfied with the way my gauge looks. Couldn't be more happier. And as you can see with the new plastic in here, there's no big opening like what would have been if I kept that other panel. I've got the gauge in. If you look at the needle, compared that one to like that one, you'll see that it is a little glossy. I guess I could have probably used flat paint. And if it's a big deal, I reckon I could take it back out and just paint it again. Not a big deal. But I'm very satisfied with what I got. I'm going with it. I think the gauge looks really good. There's no lights on. Here's with the lights on. You can see how bright the LEDs are. I think they look really good. I'll probably go ahead and swap out the rest. I think these look good, but those white LEDs are just popping. That looks pretty freaking amazing to me. Anyway, I'm going to call this one good. And I've got another project in the works, and if you want to see, I'll show you real fast. Here's a quick bit of what it's going to be. Oh God, the radio's out. Oh God. Before you say, are you doing the radio next or what? No, I'm not. Actually, I am troubleshooting the heater in this car. I'm troubleshooting the heater and the air conditioner in this car. I currently have no heat, and it is driving me crazy. I know we're coming up on winter, and I really would like to have a nice hot heater in this car, and right now that's just not the case. So bear with me, you're going to see some of this here pretty soon. Anyway, enjoy the videos. Make sure if you like, subscribe, and follow me. And we'll see if we can get this car and everything on it fixed.